Hello everyone, my name is Corbin Jones. This is my Power BI dashboard for Project 3 of EN 605-662 data visualization. So let's break down each of these four visualizations that I have listed here on the dashboard. So as you can see here in the top left, we have a scatter plot. Now this scatter plot details career average rushing yards per game. Um, for various different NFL running backs. So we have 11 different running backs listed here, sorted in order, with the highest here on the left. Um, the other interesting thing that I added to this visualization in particular is the total number of games and the total number of yards that a player has. That enables us to not only see the general trend here, and the main focus of this chart being the average rush yards per game, but we can also get a little bit of an immediate look before having to actually do research on that player about what their career looked like. So kind of one interesting player to highlight here is Elijah Mitchell. Most of these other players have a large number of career games, but he only has played 11 games, so he's probably the outlier here. And then a number of other people. Kyron Williams is the second lowest at 28 games played. So they're probably the two interesting entries. And then again, total number of yards kind of gives us an indicator of, are they um, maybe a flukier player where they don't have the sample size that some of these other players have. So that's the top left chart. In the top right here, in some of the other visualizations, we've broken down fantasy points per touch. This chart is a little bit different. It's a matrix. It breaks down average fantasy points per touch. So not just from one season, but over a player's entire career. So, you know, looking there as if a player had maybe one good season, but had a couple of other down seasons, maybe they're not making an appearance on this chart. There is also a minimum of 100 touches to be recorded on this chart. So as we can see here, we have the average for a career of fantasy points per touch, and then also um, their career average touches per game and the sum of the total number of fantasy points they had throughout their career. These two columns kind of give us a better idea of if this player had, a smaller sample size, um, in a shorter career, or maybe, in the case of Darren Sproles, 852 career fantasy points. He's a little bit of a longer term player than most of the other people listed here on this chart. So again, just trying to provide some more context to the main takeaways here, which is the career fantasy points per touch. Moving now down to the bottom left, we have career games played. So this is going to provide us some interesting insights into running back injuries. We see a lot of the same names here that we see on a lot of the other career charts, but a couple of main outliers here being Thomas Jones, Frank Gore, Darren Sproles, um, Latavius Murray, D'Angelo Williams. These players don't necessarily make it onto a lot of the charts, such as like career touchdowns or maybe career yards. So they played a lot of games, but maybe they weren't necessarily as fantasy relevant. Whereas, Frank Gore has a career average fantasy points per game of 10. Somebody like LaDainian Tomlinson is much higher at 16. Or Adrian Peterson almost at 14. So again, the tooltips just really being geared towards providing a full context to the visualization rather than just the main takeaway being the total number of games played. Then finally, for our New York Giants specific question, we have a breakdown of the total fantasy points by running backs in the history of the New York Giants. And we have the breakdown of which player is responsible for which portion of those fantasy points. So obviously in first we have Tiki Barber, who makes up almost a quarter of the Giants' total fantasy points ever by running backs. So that's a pretty significant portion. A couple other names of note, Saquon Barkley in second with 17%, Brandon Jacobs almost to 15%, and Ahmad Bradshaw at 11%. So kind of a lot of those same names that we've seen in some of these other New York Giants charts, but just a much more fascinating way to also include some of these lower down names into the chart. So I thought this was a pretty interesting visualization there. Finally, we'll touch on some of these filters. So we have a lot of local filters that enable these visualizations. This chart in particular has the just New York Giants team filter, but we also have a number of filters on this page. So our two global filters that we have for this dashboard are all of the names and the years. And that enables us to do some further analysis So we can break it down by year if we want to remove some of the years, or if we want to look at a specific time range. That'll enable the users of this dashboard to really dive into the specific years that they want to investigate. And then in the case of outliers, this name filter allows you to exclude specific names. So say in the case of career average rushing yards, we didn't want to necessarily establish a minimum game filter, but we wanted to remove outliers like Elijah Mitchell and Kyron Williams. We could do that by specifically filtering them out of the name filter, and that would update all four of the different charts. So we can go ahead and select all the names here, and then we can go ahead and remove, um, let's say we want to take out Danny Woodhead out of the um, list here. You can see he disappears from this chart over here on the top right. And let's say we want to take out Tiki Barber. He's a good example because we'll see him removed from multiple charts. So we see him removed from the fantasy points here on the bottom right, and we also see him removed from the career average rush yards here on the top left. That is my recording of my Power BI dashboard. Thank you.